Hello and good morning, everyone, and welcome to your morning briefing for Wednesday, the 6th of August, 2025. I'm your host, Mike Shelby, and let's go ahead and jump inside the Beltway. Robert, I guess over the past day or two, we saw a member of Doge, this kid nicknamed Big Balls. He was attacked in D.C. at like 3 o'clock in the morning. Apparently, he was out with a friend, and a group of thugs beat him up pretty badly, apparently. And now President Trump is threatening to federalize D.C. So what's the latest?
Good morning, Mike. That's right. Yesterday, President Donald Trump said that if D.C. cannot get its act together, quote, and quickly, then the Trump administration is going to assert federal control over Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm. Is this, I guess the first question is, does he have the legal authority to do this?
I think this would come down to Congress having to effectively take control over the D.C. government, because prior to, I think it was the 70s when D.C. got its own local government that was not governed by the U.S. Congress.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then let's move on. And listen, I'm just going to let you take it from the top here, but let's go ahead and jump into these drone rules.
So yesterday, the Transportation Department, they announced a new rule that is going to ease Biden-era restrictions on long-range commercial drone flights. And this is, according to the drone industry, going to be a major boon to U.S. domestic drone development and production, because this new rule would maintain restrictions on flying over large public events, require some additional federal security screening for some employees involved in these drone flights, and require these companies to continue following federal cybersecurity rules, but would ease some of the flight restrictions that are currently in place. And then yesterday, President Donald Trump said that tariffs on pharmaceutical imports are going to be announced within the next week. Trump added that initially these pharma tariffs will be low, and that low tariff will have a maximum of 18 months. And then the tariffs on pharmaceuticals could increase to up to 250% after that 18-month period. And then moving over to the domestic, yesterday, a 3-judge panel from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that Texas can implement a 2021 election law that required an ID match for mail-in ballots. The Biden administration originally sued to block this ID match provision in 2021, and I don't expect the Trump administration to appeal this decision. The Democrats from New York, Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania that are attending the National Conference of State Legislature Summit in Boston yesterday urged Democrat-controlled states across the U.S. to introduce bills banning ICE agents from wearing face coverings during enforcement operations. And then the Department of Justice charged 2 Chinese nationals in California for illegally exporting tens of millions of dollars worth of NVIDIA advanced AI chips to China. The DOJ said that these Chinese nationals used their company ALX Solutions, which is based in El Monte, California, to ship these advanced AI chips through Malaysia and Singapore. And then finally, U.S. cargo shippers are saying that the Trump administration cuts to USAID and humanitarian aid shipments have ground sections of the U.S. shipping industry to a halt. Specifically, Virginia-based Maersk said that these USAID shipments account for a major portion of their revenue, and aid shipment cuts, they say, would make it impossible to grow the U.S. cargo fleet in the future.
All right, Robert, thanks for that excellent roll-up of Inside the Beltway and some domestic issues. Let's go ahead and move on to the global sit rep. And I guess, Robert, we'll stay with you talking about this latest out of Lebanon here. There's a push to disarm the militant wing of Hezbollah, which is also called Hezbollah. And then also, what are they going to do with the political entity known as Hezbollah? So there's these Lebanese Christians and Sunnis are pushing on this. What's going on?
So just as some background, there is a power sharing agreement in Lebanon that came out of the Lebanese Civil War, and it split power in the government between Christians, Sunni, Shia, and Druze. And in this case, the Sunni prime minister is ordering the Lebanese armed forces, which is headed by a Christian Lebanese man, to submit a plan, and they want to centralize control of all weapons in Lebanon under the Christian-controlled Lebanese army. And Hezbollah leader Naim Qassem said that they're not going to give up their firepower while all power cards remain with the Israeli enemy. I think this is a major move by the Sunni and Christian parts of the Lebanese government. which is, I think the point is twofold here. It's removing a major center of power for Shiites within the Lebanese government, because Hezbollah was the only militia that was allowed to remain armed after that power sharing agreement. And I think also meant to appeal to Israel to stop their airstrikes and strikes in Lebanon.
Mm-hmm. And then this would also have geostrategic implications, not only obviously for Israel, being that Lebanon's right on their doorstep, but also reducing the so-called Shia crescent, which the Iranians want to extend into Lebanon and Syria. So, all right, thanks for that update. That's very interesting and something we will follow. I would imagine the U.S. would be pretty happy to get behind that, especially if you could bring some peace and stability to Lebanon by kicking Hezbollah out. I don't even know how feasible that is, but Robert, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I think this would be a major. I think the U.S. would definitely support this, because Hezbollah is effectively Iran's foreign policy proxy, not just in the region, but also over here in the Western Hemisphere. But definitely in the region, that's how Iran really reaches into Lebanon to advance its own foreign policy interests. So this would be another pressure point on Iran from the U.S. perspective.
Mm-hmm. Maximum pressure. All right, thanks for that, Robert. Let's go ahead and move on here. Speaking of Israel, Jared, I just reading through my feeds this morning, I saw there's quite a disagreement among some senior officials in the Israeli government about exactly what to do with Gaza. And apparently they have not reached a specific decision on this, but you say they're weighing their options. What's the latest?
Yes. So high-level Israeli officials all met yesterday in order to discuss, hey, what do we do with Gaza? How do we achieve the strategic goals that we laid out, which is conquer it, basically, clear it out, resettle it, but also maintain or rescue the hostages that Hamas has. So there was apparently 3 hours of heated discussion yesterday over this, including, back and forth between the prime minister and the defense force chief of staff. So that's pretty remarkable. And the Israeli defense force chief of staff reportedly even described the occupation of Gaza itself. So the entire stated goal of it to be a strategic trap. The Israeli Security Cabinet will convene tomorrow for more discussion and a potential decision on this, on how they actually intend to carry out all of this, keeping in mind that they did say, hey, we do intend to just totally resettle this area. So if you only take a half measure on this, you're going to be in just as much trouble as if you went the entire way and try to do an occupation. Israel doesn't seem to have very many good options here for themselves.
Mm-hmm. All right, and then moving over to the Baltics, is there any specific reason why Lithuania wants more air defense assets from NATO?
Sure is. Gonna actually get into that here. So, yep, they're requesting additional assets, but that's because a Russian drone flew over their capital and landed in what's being called a military training area. Not sure if it's on a base or just a commonly used area. Nobody has specified that I could find. Now, the drone reportedly had explosives attached to it that did not detonate. So the Lithuania authorities are investigating the drone to figure out, hey, what exactly happened here? Right now, the prevailing theory is that this drone basically just accidentally entered Lithuanian airspace, basically got lost.
From where? Kaliningrad or from Belarus, or where did this thing come out of?
From Belarus.
Okay.
But they have not made a final decision on that. Regardless, they do want air defense in order to be able to shoot these things down, because in the event that this was hostile and just a probing action, you have to be able to take, concrete measures against it. We have seen for a couple of years now, occasionally Russian drones will get into Romania as well. So I expect a lot more NATO air defense to move eastward and actually bolster that line.
Mm-hmm. Jared, I guess it's difficult to tell sometimes whether this was somebody plugged in. It's maybe difficult for me to believe someone plugged in some wrong grid coordinates, or maybe there was some electronic warfare interference or something to cause this thing to go astray. Otherwise, this really looks like kind of a harassment and intimidation, which the Russians are kind of famous for. Is this basically what we're looking at?
I think so. Like you, I find it really hard to believe that like you just said an autonomous drone with the wrong coordinates here, and Lithuania is the wrong way. Like it's
Right.
north of Belarus, Ukraine is south. How did it get up there? Like, and it went. I think it was 60 miles inward. So it's not like you kind of tipped into the airspace and crashed. No, you went dozens of miles inward, overflew the capital, and just we're going to pretend that's not, potentially it. Even if it was not intentionally a probing effort, it will functionally be a probing effort because the Russians just got to see, hey, they didn't shoot us down. We overflew Vilnius. We can do that again. It's. I think we're going to see a lot more tensions, and eventually NATO's going to shoot one of these things down. I just don't see how you don't. As long as they do it inside of.
Yeah, multiple NATO countries have threatened to do that.
Yeah.
As well. I mean, Poland specifically.
The big thing there will be trying to time it right so it's just inside of NATO airspace and not entering the battle space, because you do that and you've entered the war formally.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I just want to point one thing out. The Baltic nations, and I can't blame them for this, obviously, but the Baltics especially and other NATO countries, they're pretty dead set on this expectation that Putin is eventually going to launch another special military operation or something, some form of invasion into the Suwalki Gap, which is in between Poland and Lithuania. So it just seems to me that the Baltics especially are going to look at this and say, well, this is obviously another indicator. This is more or less probing and, maybe confirming that expectation. So I do want to point that out because we've heard from, they're anonymous, of course, but we have heard from both Polish and German intelligence officials who have been quoted in Western media outlets. And I don't know if this is for effect or if this is what they truly believe, but they say, get ready for it. The Russians are going to have some kind of limited military operation to test NATO. And that's what they say. All right, let's go ahead and move on here to this last thing, the trilateral big deck exercises. So by big deck, I guess you were talking about aircraft carriers.
It's the 4 ships on screen here. I know it's a funny term, but it's also like the unofficial Navy term. These are all big decks, as opposed to the small boys, which I was on. Anyhow, so the U.S. Navy, Royal Navy, and the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force are conducting 9 days worth of exercises out in the Western Pacific, and they'll cover a slew of things, including anti-submarine warfare. There's a Japanese sub with them to do that, and cross-decking. Now, historically, cross-decking has meant you send a cadre of officers, maybe even some senior NCOs over. You kind of learn how everybody works, and carry on from there to figure out how best to interact with each other. I don't think that's happening anymore. I think when they say cross-decking now, they're talking about what we covered before with the UK Carrier Strike Group, where you go and land an aircraft on there. You practice launch and recovery, because all of these are capable of taking the same aircraft. They're all taking the F-35s. They're all operating with the same. The UK Carrier Strike Group even has a U.S. Marine Corps fighter squadron on it right now. This is a massive interoperability exercise. In addition to that, this is an enormous show of force. You have basically four aircraft carriers present in the same area immediately after China sent 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very interesting. And it also plays into this big strategic narrative here, which is the United States has built this coalition that is probably much larger than China put together, just in terms of ability to sustain operations, maybe. And just one other thing here, too. I had this retired Army colonel in one of the classes I was teaching one time, and he was talking about Napoleon. And he said, Napoleon was a brilliant commander, but you look at who Napoleon fought, these coalitions of European countries, and the soldiers spoke different languages, the leaders, the generals, commanders, they all spoke different languages. This was in a time where there was obviously no instant communication. Things had to be delivered by courier. And he just said, he was basically just talking about how difficult it was for this coalition to get on the same page and be in the same place at the same time with the same plan and communicate effectively. And he said that's one of the big strategic limitations that this European coalition had against Napoleon. And I kind of look at this almost like the United States. They're trying to get multiple countries in the same place at the same time on the same page with the same warfighting doctrine with military interoperability. And it seems like if the United States and Japan and these other countries can figure this out, they just have such an incredible advantage over China. Is that the way to look at it?
Yes, but let me add some more confounding factors to that to really put this into perspective. You have the British, the Australians, and the Americans speaking all English, yes, but using different jargon. You have the Japanese, and there actually is kind of a difference between proper surface warfare jargon from the U.S. Carrier Strike Group and amphibious warfare, which you're going to get from the USS America Amphibious Readiness Group, which you can see on the top right. In addition to that, you got the Dutch and the Spanish in here as well. There are a ton of different languages being spoken, but all of this is being done ahead of time, so you don't have to have the learning curve at the same time that you're having to fight for your lives. And there's a major difference in communication. Nobody has to go ship to ship all the time to coordinate everything. You have a shared battle space picture via your data links. That way, everybody can speak their own native tongue. They can actually, interoperate because there will be a translation of data. It just gives the raw data of, hey, here is such and such here. We classified this as an adversary or an enemy or a suspect. That's way easier to understand than it is to actually translate into languages and then into jargon in order to coordinate in an analog fashion. It's difficult, but it's being done, and I think it's going to be done well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's good to hear. But let's just get technical here just for one more second. In Iraq and Afghanistan, one problem that we continually ran into is how do you get intelligence into the hands of ISAF or International Security Assistance Force coalition? So that would be the Germans, the Swedes, the Danish, the Brits, especially the Canadians, especially down south in Kandahar and Helmand. And so the Army came up with this thing, or maybe it's DOD, I don't know, came up with this thing. I think it was called Stone Ghost, which was the classified network that apparently it was built for ISAF, if I remember correctly. And there was this big push. They said, get all the secret stuff off of JWICS being the top secret system. Get all this secret REL to ISAF stuff. So classified secret intelligence reports that are releasable to ISAF. Get all that stuff off of JWICS and SIPR and put it on Stone Ghost so the Canadians and Brits and other people can read it. I'm assuming you have SIPR and JWICS on these ships, correct? Yeah. Or some, okay. How are we going to get classified intelligence information? I guess the question is there a system similar to Stone Ghost that is I don't even know what they're calling this coalition, but are we giving these foreign militaries access to at least some secret intelligence, or that's releasable to them? So there's a release caveat there that they can have it if they are authorized, if they have certain clearances. Do you know how we're planning on communicating that to them?
So there are some caveats that obviously can be shared. You got Five Eyes. That's super easy. May use NATO in order to conduct with the other European forces. I think the Japanese have their own, but the really big important piece here is the shared data picture. You all use the same data links. If I remember right, everybody uses link 16 or link 11, either way. But what that does is just give you the pertinent information. Hey, I identified somebody here. Here's how I assess them. You don't have to worry about how. Just here's who I think is here. And then each individual ship, if they want to, can go try to confirm using their own sensors that they may not necessarily want to share with us or with other allies. That's fine, as long as you have a shared, common operating picture, which navies I mean, you don't have a carrier strike group if you don't have a common operating picture. Plain and simple. They do not work if you don't have that. So it's already functional on the, I'll say, the tactical level, just because the carrier strike group acts as a single unit, even though they're different hulls. The moment you get into the operational level where you have multiple ships operating over an enormous amount of water, you're going to have, first off, that picture is going to be amazing. It's going to be huge, but you can actually develop a proper common operating picture and share information that's just the information you need and not the information you don't across multiple systems. And all of those operate, you can share. There's a way to do it.
All right. Interesting. Well, that's another part of that whole kind of C4 ISR problem. All right. That being what? Command, control, communications, computers, and then intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, C4 ISR. All right. Thanks for that, Jared. And with that, let's go ahead and move on. 77 protests today. Listen, I may cut this slide unless we just have something absolutely pertinent to tell you. But just a reminder, if you look on this map and you see your area, head over to forwardobserver.com, sign up for a free 7-day trial. This is one of the services we provide to members that is behind the paywall. We're tracking not just the national level protest groups, but the far left groups, the direct action groups. We are tracking all that stuff and mapping it for you every single day. And with that, let's go ahead and move on here. Robert, all right, sanctuary cities and sanctuary states. This has been a big thing. Tom Homan has been saying for months, we're going to go after these city mayors. We're going to go after these state governors if they don't get rid of these sanctuary state policies, city policies. So are they finally getting around to that?
Yeah, yesterday the DOJ released this list, and they said they've been basically combing through state and local level laws over the last few months to compile a list of all the sanctuary state cities and counties. But what was interesting about this release from the DOJ is that at the very end, they mentioned that they have filed multiple lawsuits against some of these sanctuary jurisdictions to compel compliance with federal immigration law, and that they are willing to assist any of these sanctuary jurisdictions that want to be removed from this list by helping them identify and eliminate those policies. I think this is a kind of basically an implied threat of civil or criminal action to get these states to start, repealing some of these laws, because I don't think the Trump administration expects these, especially all of these are Democrat-controlled states or some of the cities, to cooperate with immigration enforcement. But I think the goal of this, what is to me looks like an implied threat of civil or criminal action, is to stop these sanctuary jurisdictions from blocking state and local law enforcement from cooperating with ICE, and I think likely ahead of future ICE surges into the states. I haven't seen any news yet on what the next state the Trump administration is going to surge ICE into, but they on this list are included. New York and Illinois are included on this list, and I think those are probably the two likely targets.
Yeah, New York City, Chicago, Seattle. I think we're maybe in Northern Virginia ish. Those were four of the areas or cities that they were talking about. Robert, thanks for staying on top of this. And as soon as we find out where this next ICE surge is going to happen, please do let us know. All right, let's move on here down to Texas. And Robert, this is I'm still trying to figure out how this ends. I think I've kind of got it figured out, but if you can, please run us through the latest facts.
So yesterday, Texas Governor Greg Abbott filed an emergency petition with the Texas State Supreme Court. And this one is just to remove Houston-based State Rep Gene Wu from office. And then after that emergency petition was filed, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton said he's going to file more emergency petitions to remove more Texas Democrats from office with the state Supreme Court if they do not return to Texas by Friday.
Mm-hmm. So, all right, Robert, you've got a much better handle on the court and legal process here, but from my vantage point, it seems like Democrats at least appear to be in a no-win scenario here in Texas, and their only hope is a lengthy court battle. Correct?
Correct.
I mean, basically. So let's just run through a couple possibilities, Robert, and I'll get your take. Number one, if Democrats continue to break quorum, which they say they will, then they're going to be removed from their seats. So these Democrats, they fled the state, if you're unfamiliar with this. And the Supreme Court of Texas is very likely to side with Abbott and Paxton, that these Democrat state reps can be removed from office for leaving the state. Basically, the argument is they abdicated their responsibility by breaking quorum, and so we're going to remove them if they won't do their job and replace them eventually in a special election with someone who will. That's the first thing, is that the Supreme Court sides with Abbott and Paxton. The second thing, if this current special session ends on the 19th of August, and so it appears to me that Democrats will probably try to hold out, at least many of them, by the 19th when that special session ends. But Governor Abbott can call another special session immediately after in order to pass this redistricting plan. So this is not something where Democrats, they just say, oh, if we can hold out till August. They're going to have to hold out till December, because that's when this plan needs to be approved by in order to affect the 2026 midterms. And if the state of Texas does go through and vacate these seats, then Republicans are going to gain a working quorum in the next special session, which could basically come at the end of August. Also, the third option is, I think Republicans only need 12 Democrats to return to the House to achieve a quorum. I think they need 2/3, which is 100 out of 150. Republicans have 88. I think they only need 12. And so it's possible that maybe we do see 12 Democrats return in order to avoid being removed from their seats. Also, just a couple of things. They're obviously going to challenge this in the courts, or I would expect them to, Robert. Federal courts, to my understanding, cannot overrule the Supreme Court of Texas except if a federal judge believes that the state of Texas has violated the 14th Amendment rights of these legislators. Do you size up the situation similarly, or what does the legal and court picture look like here?
Yeah, I think this is generally correct. I think the part, so I looked through the filing, the petition from Abbott, and I think one of the major problems Democrats will have in opposing the Supreme Court of Texas from allowing them to be removed from office is that some of the evidence cited by Abbott were comments from Gene Wu saying that he was basically willing to stay indefinitely outside of Texas to stop a quorum. And I've seen similar comments from other state Democrats, which I think is not going to do them any favors. If they are removed from office and the federal courts try to intervene under the 14th Amendment, I think it's likely to come through the Equal Protection Clause and like things like disparate impact. I think these Democrats, they've already been making this argument that this is going to disproportionately impact minorities in Texas. And I think that's the avenue they would take if they tried to challenge it in federal court. I'm not sure how successful that would necessarily be. That is the angle there. I'm 99% sure they will go with. But in the meantime, the longer they stay outside of Texas, I think the stronger Abbott and Paxton's argument that they've abandoned their offices, and the more likely we'll see more of these Democrats removed, assuming that Gene Wu is successfully removed from office. As far as I understand, 6 Democrats did show up to the special session on Monday, so I think they only need 6 more Democrats to return to Texas.
Mm-hmm. That's what happened. They also did that in 2021. I'm pretty sure it was 21. And that's exactly what happened. They started coming back one by one, and then a quorum was achieved. All right. Well, Robert, thanks for staying on top of this. And there are some good questions. And I do just want to take this question briefly, since it's here and now. If states continue to gerrymander to this degree with both parties, along with illegal immigration still being a factor, does that increase the chance for civil conflict and possible balkanization? Well, in general, yes, it is an accelerator of political violence. On a long enough timeline, it probably is an accelerator of some form of balkanization. If the United States were to split apart one day, however that could happen. So I would say in general, yes, this won't be a trigger. But looking back, we will probably look at this Trump plan to redistrict Texas in the middle of the decade as an accelerator, as something that turns the temperature up, especially if Democrats are reminded every congressional election cycle that they are locked out of power in the House by a couple of seats because these red states gerrymandered and because maybe some blue states didn't do enough in time. I think California is probably, Robert, your expectation is that even if California follows suit, they're not going to be able to do this by 2026 midterms, correct?
Correct. They have to overturn that independent commission law.
So they would have to call like a state referendum to do that?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Well, this is something that we'll obviously continue paying attention to. It is probably the most politically significant thing I've seen this year, maybe in the past several years. And I don't think Robert, it just briefly, it has occurred to me. I'm not saying this is escalate to de-escalate, but it seems to me that maybe the Trump administration may picture this as, okay, you get Texas and Ohio to redistrict, maybe some other red states. And even if Democrats followed suit in California and New York, you say that if all 50 states were to be gerrymandered to the extreme, Republicans would still hold an advantage, correct?
Correct. That's based off of the apportionment from 2020, which put Republican states at 231 seats and Democrat-controlled states at the time at 204 seats.
Okay. So maybe this is a case where maybe the Trump administration is messaging to Democrats that maybe they don't want to go down this road. I don't know. Maybe that's a possibility. Robert, all right. Anything to add before we move on?
No.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that. Thanks for staying on top as well. All right. And with that, let's go ahead and talk about these hypersonic missiles that are now, Jared, they're being fired during this Talisman Sabre military exercise.
Yes. Just a real quick clarification. These are not hypersonic missiles, but hypersonic glide vehicles. It's kind of nitpicky, but there is a difference just in flight. The glide vehicles maintain a hypersonic flight where necessarily boosts all the way through, where a missile will be hypersonic during the entire thing. And we have a glide vehicle, not a missile. So yes, U.S. Army deployed what it calls the long-range hypersonic weapon system to Talisman Sabre, and they deployed it to the Northern Territory, which you can see here in Australia. Now, the Indo-PACOM says this is the first operational employment of the system outside of the continental United States. So this is actually a pretty big deal for it. Now, per the commander of Indo-PACOM, Admiral Paparo, he claims that this is pretty significant achievement for deploying, positioning, exercising command and control over the system, and doing all this inside of a forward environment. It's enormous for Indo-PACOM as a whole. Now, this is actually a pretty rapid development because the Army completed its first test fire using a battery just at the end of last year. So from test fire to now, well, really firing, you're looking at less than 7 months. That's a pretty decent turnaround. The big takeaway here, as you can see, the estimated coverage of this weapon system is enormous. I had to put it in the middle of Northern Territory because they didn't say it was on the coast or anything like that. But you can see this thing covers just a staggering amount of territory here. As the United States fields more hypersonic weapons, which can reach China from relatively safe distances, because you can actually place one of these things in like southern Philippines and touch most of the southern coast of China. This will shift the balance of power significantly into the United States' favor. Now, that is the reason I would say, hey, if you place these in the Philippines, you could potentially touch China. And why that's even something that would cross my mind is that we saw the United States Army do something like this with the Typhoon missile launcher, which can launch Tomahawk missiles. They placed it into the northern Philippines, which gives a ton of coverage all over the coast of China. Additionally, I do want to point out, just in plain terms, the Army and Indo-Pacific Command, they're confirming, hey, the Army has an operational hypersonic weapon system. It is in the Pacific. Most people aren't covering that the U.S. is hypersonic capable now. Plain and simple. It is hypersonic capable. That's something that, I mean, even just last month, you could hear people going, oh, we don't have these. We're missing these. No, that's not true. And one U.S. Navy outlet that was reporting on this, which Indo-PACOM is controlled by controlled by the Navy, so they're pretty heavy on that. They're saying that not only does the Army have a battery, they have 5 batteries available, suggesting that this entire system is actually much more mature than what most people probably believe, and the balance of power is probably already significantly in the United States' favor for this weapon system. That also bodes really well for the Navy's plans to have a ship and sub-launch version of this, which are both supposed to enter service in 2029, but we may see that come out ahead of time, especially when you keep in mind that the Army and Navy are actively coordinating to make these systems not just interoperable, but have interchangeable parts. So take the launcher you see on screen here, find a way to put it into the ships, find a way to put it into the subs. That way it uses the same missile, it's the same parts, it's the same supply chain, just to actually field these things rapidly. That I think we could potentially see these in time for 2027. It's a long shot, but we may well see it. And keep in mind, 2027 is not a hard and fast date. If China waits until 2028, 2030, these things will be fielded, and probably in much greater numbers than previously anticipated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very important point, and it sure seems like China's behind the clock here on a lot of this stuff, which we've been talking about for at least since 2022 now, which is the United States continues to build this coalition, and the longer the Chinese wait, the larger and more interoperable this coalition will be, and the harder their military challenge will be. And not just military, but also diplomatic, economic, etc. All right. Thanks for that, Jared. And with that, I think we do have a few questions to get to.
Yep. Let me check behind the paywall. Nothing behind there. So we'll start off right here.
All right. Have these drone incursions happened in Latvia or Estonia? It's a good question.
I don't remember seeing that
I can't recall, but I don't know.
I don't remember seeing that they have, but it wouldn't surprise me.
But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me either. But also, let me just say, I don't check for Russian drones in the Baltics every day either. So quite possible they could, and we obviously missed it. All right. My understanding is that Trump could take control of the DC police or use the National Guard without Congress to revoke home rule. Robert, what's your take?
Yeah, he can activate the National Guard, the DC National Guard. He's the commander in chief of the DC National Guard. But Congress, to actually take control of the city government, would require Congress. Because there's the district clause in the Constitution, and they would have to revoke the Home Rule Act, which is the law they passed in, I think, 72, to give DC home rule.
Mm-hmm. All right. Next question. How are we doing with manufacturing of our various arms and military equipment? Have we brought more back for production? Have we geared up for production? Well, I'll tell you, one thing we've done is struck these defense cooperation deals with foreign countries. And I guess we've been planning on moving some of that production over there. That's definitely a Jared question. Robert, do you have any updates on this?
As far as major defense contractors, I haven't seen any updates, but I did catch a story on a small defense drone manufacturer that's trying to effectively grow the domestic like FPV drone production supply chains. And they're investing a bunch of money with the anticipation of like future orders, but that's the most I've seen.
I've also seen some veterans, like GWAT veterans specifically, in kind of defense wonks, call for the Pentagon to stand up an actual drone like agency. Interesting thought. All right, Jared. Last I heard is, a couple of years ago we heard there was a lot of focus on this. We heard directly from these defense industrial base CEOs. They say it's taken us longer to produce the same amount of stuff. We can't produce stuff fast enough. We've got cost overruns. We've got higher input costs slowing us down. Has that changed at all?
I think it has changed. None of them have come out and said, hey, yeah, this has changed. We're good. But I have seen indicators that, yeah, things are changing in a very positive direction. I think it was Lockheed Martin said that they're seeing like a 20% increase year over year for, I forget which missile it was that they said they were making, but every year they're making 20% more. That's enormous. Now, the main complaint I saw from industry, from CEOs heading into the Trump administration was, hey, we can ramp up production. It's really hard to go from 0 to a lot, but we can go from some to a lot super easy. We just need secure funding. I've tried to cover that here in the report. It's just sometimes it's annoying to get hey, here's another promise of money. Here's another promise of money. But the moment you actually have that, basically long range funding, that they can ramp up and go, yeah, let's do this. Actually get it really spun up. And then you have a bunch of not major developers, but still pretty significant, like Anduril. They're constantly spinning up. They've got I think it's a factory going up here in Ohio. Like they're absolutely killing it. And that doesn't even start to account for what the allies are looking like. And the fact that I've really tried to hit this hard. Everything is consolidating. So you don't need to have, 15 different missiles. You need to have 3 different missiles to carry out a couple different functions. That allows way more production because you can focus on a couple of things. And you did see the Trump administration come out and say that with the announcement of the F-47 and I forget what the Navy number. It was the FAXX. That's what it was. They said, yeah, we're going to hold off on the Navy one, focus on the F-47. That's them consolidating. And frankly, the F-47 is probably going to follow the route of the F-35, where you have a base platform that you then modify a little bit for each different service per their need. That would be the way to do it. It's the same thing with like the Typhoon missile launcher. They took the Navy's vertical launching system, pulled that canister out, strapped it to a truck, and said, cool, you can launch SM2s, SM3s, 6s, Tomahawks, whatever you want. We could throw ESSMs in there if you want. That makes everything easier to ramp up, and you can just make way more. All the structural pieces are there. Now it's just a matter of actually cranking those dials.
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is things are becoming more modular, kind of like an AR-15. You throw a longer barrel and a different optic on there, and you've got a not completely different rifle, but you've got like a DMR, designated marksman rifle, or something like that.
Yeah.
Even though it's the same base AR platform. All right. Interesting. And also probably some good news. Also, Jared, let's see. Next question is, within the last 18 months, there's an article that stated we're behind China and Russia in communications, intelligence, and jamming. Let's just call it electronic warfare. I don't know. Is that still the case? Probably not on SIGINT. We're still the gold standard. I mean, U.S. SIGINT is the envy of the entire world. On EW, I'm a little less knowledgeable about. Are the Chinese better at it than us, Jared? Electronic warfare.
Yeah. Remember when we were talking about caveats earlier? Trying to parse this down. No. The reason I'll say no is that if you look at particularly China, go look at their propaganda videos. What they love to do is put out all kinds of great videos for, hey, here's what we did. Look at where their chaff is in relation to their ship and tell me, when a missile flies through that chaff cloud, where's it going to go? So systems, I won't talk about their systems. In function, the Chinese are awful. They will launch where they put their chaff clouds is going to get them killed. So, not great.
Okay. So I guess I'm not entirely following there. Give me a scenario.
So without getting into the systems, basically, for one key part of electronic warfare, everybody kind of forgets about, unless you're talking about the Air Force, is chaff. You use that to distract a missile and bring it away. When you look at how the Chinese run naval anti-ship missile defense,
when you say chaff, you're talking about the flares that come off a plane or something like that.
Yes, there's a difference, but functionally, yes. Where the Chinese launch it, they launch it in front of their ships and they just kind of stay there. And like, okay, you can do that, but the missile is going to lock onto that chaff cloud and then just plow through that into your ship. And I've never seen them change how they run it. Whenever they publish their propaganda videos, It's always the same way. It's always like you're going to cause fly through. You're going to hit yourself. So keep doing it. I love it. But in practice, they look like they don't know what they're doing with it. They look like they know they need to shoot it, but they don't know how to employ it.
Well, okay. Well, that's interesting. And thanks for the answer. Any other questions? I think we do have one over on the Ford Observer member stream. Why does Europe seem so convinced that Russia is going to attack?
Probably largely due to history. Like when you look at the poles of power, you have your Central and Western European powers. Russia has never been a slouch, and frequently they've had empires that extend into now different countries. So there's an historical impetus for it. That said, whether or not they will, I think remains up in the air. Really, whether or not they can comes down to that, because the warfare has changed significantly, and Poland is not how Poland used to be. Poland is a very significant stumbling block to Russia right now.
You know, I don't pretend to understand the European mindset. Maybe they don't even understand it. But when you look at recent history, like going back to 2008, and Russia got involved in South Ossetia and Abkhazia in Georgia, and what they did in Donetsk and Luhansk in Ukraine. And there are these ethnic Russian areas in neighboring countries, and I'm sure there's at least some truth to this. The Russians say, well, these ethnic Russians are being persecuted in these countries, and so we're going to defend them because they're ethnically Russian. And so if you're Latvia and Estonia, and in the far east reaches of your country, you have areas that have a lot of ethnic Russians, I think that is your concern, is that Russia eventually will go in and try to take parts of those territories to reclaim the ethnic Russians there. I would think that is at least the logic for the Baltics, especially. So, all right, Jared, any other questions here?
Yep. One more came in. There's one on the subscriber side that I'm not going to answer that question.
Is it a good one?
It's a very good one, but there's no way I can answer that and stay a free man. So it has to do with Chinese air defense. Yeah, not touching it.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So,
all right, Frankie says, God bless y'all and thank you for what you guys do. Well, we do appreciate that. Last question of the day. I can't help but wonder, as a late 20s CNA, is that a certified nursing assistant? Or I don't know what CNA is. They're back in college with 3 kids. I have a pretty tight group and am fairly well prepped, but what next? Well, I would say in general, you've got to start with your area study. I mean, really 3 things on the intel side. And the reason why I stress intelligence is because it doesn't matter what you want to do. It doesn't matter what you want to respond to. Whatever your fight is, whether that's getting a local sheriff elected, a good sheriff elected, responding to a natural disaster like a hurricane or tornado, or responding to a man-made disaster or local threat. Intelligence enables you to do better things faster. Having intelligence speeds up your decision-making process, and you make better decisions faster as a result of having intelligence. That's why I stress intelligence so much, because when you really know what's going on and your fog of war is reduced and you can see through the fog of war and understand your security picture, you can make very good decisions about what you do, where you do it, when you do it, and who you do it to. So everything starts with an area study. It's kind of like homework. Intelligence preparation of the battlefield for you military vets out there. You do an area study for 2 reasons. Number 1, to figure out what you're up against at the local level. So what are your threats and hazards? What are your contingencies that you need to respond to? The first step of contingency planning is identifying what scenarios you're likely to face. And then once you identify them, you can plan for them. The second reason you do an area study is to identify what you have to work with. What are your local assets and resources in your neighborhood, across your community, and your county? Who are the people, places, and things that you have to potentially marshal to respond to a natural disaster or whatever? Start with an area study. The next thing after that, or something you can do simultaneously, is build your intelligence network. It doesn't matter what happens. Grid up, grid down, internet down, whatever. We get into a war with China and our internet doesn't work most of the time because of cyber attacks or because of whatever happens. You are going to be dependent on other human beings in the area for your eyes and ears. In the Army, we said every soldier is a sensor. And in your neighborhood, every neighbor is a sensor. It is incumbent on you to build out that network and identify like-minded people in your area who can pass up information. You want to talk about a night and day security response. When we have multiple sensors, when I got a guy telling me down the road, oh, there's a suspicious car that's roaming around the neighborhood. I can't see that from my doorstep, but that guy can. And now that we know that there's suspicious vehicles out there, we can do something about it. Like if there's an actual emergency going on. So build your intelligence network. Those are the next two steps. If you haven't done them, do your area study and then build your intelligence network. And with that, by the way, I wrote a book a couple years ago called the Area Intelligence Handbook. It's a step-by-step guide on how to build an area study, how to gather local intelligence, how to build your area assessment, figure out the things that you need to plan for and be thinking about before you have to do something about it. It's up on Amazon as an ebook. If you just search area study book, it'll come right up. It's a top search result. All right, with that, everyone, thanks so much. If you like what we do, if you want access to our intelligence behind the paywall, if you want a strategic advantage over your peers and over the future, become a member of Forward Observer. Head over to www.forwardobserver.com. Sign up for a free 7-day trial. We appreciate your support. You're going to keep us producing this intelligence, and as this domestic security situation continues to ramp up, you're going to get day-to-day coverage, potentially hour-to-hour coverage if things get hot enough. And that's our entire mission here at Forward Observer, is to identify the trends, identify the trajectories, figure out what the future looks like so that you are not shocked when the next big thing happens. And with that, everyone, let me just say one other thing here, and it is about the chat over on YouTube. I love that y'all comment and talk to each other and ask questions and many times contribute. I think that's fantastic. I would ask that everyone stay on topic in the chat. If many people are saying the same message over and over again, and I look down and 50% of the comments are saying the same thing, like saying whatever to each other, I think that detracts from the mission. So I would appreciate that. And with that, everyone, have a great rest of your day. We will be back in your inbox tomorrow morning, back on the show starting at 08 Central Time. Until then, be well and stay out front.